Today we're going to be taking a look at how we can take values from a form submission and automatically map those using the update model mechanism that's built into the controller into an entity that already exists. In prior episodes, we've shown you various ways in which you can set up your controllers to handle or accept data from form submissions, and these things include things such as passing in each individual variable as parameters into the action method, or having the model binding logic within the MVC take the form fields and map that into an entity and pass that entity into our action. In this episode, we'll show you how to take data from a form submission and map it into an object that already exists. We'll do this without using a single line of property setting code. You'll normally want to do this in a scenario where you already have an entity either in memory or you're going to pull out a database, and you either want to override or update values from the form submission. We'll learn the various ways in which you can use the UpdateModel and TryUpdateModel mechanism that's built into the controller class to populate our entities. Let's go ahead and get started. I have a form here. It's got 4 values in it: SKU, name, description, price. And I want to be able to take those values and map those into an item entity when you hit form submit. I have here an order item. It's got the same 4 values. Now I've got a controller here. When you click submit on the form, the controller action is called is save. So let's go ahead and figure out how we can do this the simplest way. Now the first thing we want to do is actually grab an instance of our order item. Now in many cases this order item will already be in memory, so maybe it's in a session, maybe you're pulling off cache, or maybe you're actually going to go retrieve the data and populate it and return it back out of your service layer via your data repository. In my case here, I'm just going to create a new instance of the order item. So let's go ahead and create an update model, and we'll call it order item. And that's it. That's all I have to do. Now I can hear you now going, wait a minute. How does the MVC framework know how to map the given form fields into the given object fields? Well, it's pretty straightforward. You'll notice that I have all my text boxes named SKU, name, description, price, and they match the name of my properties on my object. As long as those 2 things match, you're good to go. So let's run this and see what happens. Yep. Forgot to set my breakpoint, so hold on. Now I have an empty object here. Everything's null or zeros. Let's step over this. I now have a fully populated object. Description, name, price, SKU. So you can see real quick within 2 lines of code I can take values from a form submission and populate an object model off of that. Well, that's pretty cool, but I can hear you right now going, wait a minute, Derek, I don't necessarily want every form field to be populated in my entity. How can I go about limiting what is actually pushed into my entity? Well, the good news is for you, you can actually do that. So we're going to go to update model, do order item, but now I'm going to use an overload of this. Now I'm going to create an array here where this array contains a list of properties in which I want populated. Now you'll notice I did not put description in this, so that tells me that I do not want the description property to be populated for my form submission. So let's go ahead and give this a run and see what happens. Now I'm going to step over this. If you take a look, my description is null. That tells me that I did not populate the description field. Well, that's pretty cool, pretty handy. And I can hear you right now saying, wait a minute, wait a minute. Great, I can limit what properties are actually populated. However, I don't want to sprinkle magic strings all over my controllers such as this. I would like to do it in a better, more sophisticated manner, more typed manner that allows me compile time checks. How can I do that? Well, fortunately, the guys over at the MVC team have thought about that and created something to help you out. Let's go ahead and create an interface on this order item real quick. And I'm going to call this IBindable. And I'm only going to include the properties I want inside this interface. But it would help if I stop my project. So I've created this interface called IBindable, which sits on top of my order item object. And you'll notice it does not contain an interface property for description. I'm going to bounce back to my controller right here. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this because we don't want it. And I'm going to call update. I'm gonna call update model, but I'm gonna use the template and give it the interface I order item and the object I want to populate. Let's run this again. Let's hit submit, see what happens. Stepped over that, and again, description's null. Pretty cool. Well, there you go. I've shown you pretty quickly how you can use an interface to populate your object, as well as use the array list to populate only certain fields. But I want to show you one thing real quick. In my interface, as well as my concrete objects, price is an integer. It's required. Let's go ahead and hit submit real quick and see what happens. If I F5 over this, you'll notice I get an exception. It tells me that I was not successfully updated. The reason for this was, bounce back real quick, since I did not give a price into my text field, it's an empty string, and that doesn't map directly to an integer, so I get a type exception. So there's got to be a way I can get around this, and sure enough there is. What I can actually do is I can do if TryUpdateModel. So they've added the new TryUpdateModel, which allows me to do the exact same thing. So I can do IBindable. But now, if something fails, instead of throwing an exception, it'll return a false on my TryUpdateModel. So let's go ahead and try this and see what happens. I'm going to step over this, and sure enough it did fail. And if I look at my order item, everything except for my price is 0 and description is null. But now I can handle that gracefully. Maybe I default all my values, maybe I return some kind of error message, something along those lines. And you'll notice that by default it does know that the price was incorrectly populated, so it does highlight that in red for you. A little built-in nice UI feature, part of the MVC framework. So let's review what we've learned today. We've learned how to use the update model mechanism that's part of the controller class to take values from a form submission and map those directly into an entity. We've seen 3 different ways we can do this. We can very simply do it by just saying, you know what, match every field in my form to every property in my entity. We've seen how we can restrict the properties that get populated based on a string array. We've also seen how you can do that same thing, but instead of using a string array, which is not type safe, which is not compile safe, we've done it using interfaces. And then lastly, we've taken a look at how to use the TryUpdateModel, which will allow us to, instead of throwing exceptions, return false, and maybe handle that scenario more gracefully. So I hope you learned something, and until next time.